Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you all see the screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Wow. Well, how is everyone feeling this morning?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Same. Start of the day.
Mhm.
I want to go ahead and get others to come in and join. Today, we want to go and cover dealing with stress and why am I stressed out? A lot of this is coming from some of the sessions we had earlier in the first three months. I'm not sure if those remember when we talked about emotional intelligence, but I'm going to refer to that a little bit in part of the session because that's going to help us to understand stress and the reactions on our body and our mind. And we're going to learn some helpful tips on how to deal with that and manage that. The other source of resource that I'm coming from, and we'll be using it next month also, is a book that I was referred to that I went through, and that's um, okay. Heal Your Drained Brain. That's from Dr. Mike Dow. And this is something that it can get technical, but it gave me a great understanding of the relationship of stress as it relates to body, mind, and then nutrition, exercise, and supplements and food that will help with this. So depending upon where you're at on the spectrum, you utilize all those different tips to be able to help deal with the fact of stress and all the things that might cause anxiety, frustration, depression. It's a very good resource. I've used it very much so over the last several years. And today I want to just cover over certain points that might be gleaned from it that we can use as building from this month. And then we can go ahead for next month as we get a little bit more in detail to the nutrition and the effects. So it's a book I highly recommend. But I just want to warn you, it's a little bit technical sometimes coming from a doctor perspective.
I downloaded it and it is very technical.
Yeah. So today I'm going to try to explain a little bit of it. You know, you don't have to be a psychiatrist, a doctor, but the very concepts that he talks about 5 years ago, I was in an executive session and there was a doctor when I was up in Canada that talked about this very same thing. And he has a smaller book too that he kind of, it's a little, almost like pocket book that talked about the very same things. And so
Mhm.
those are the things that that I want to gleam about. But you'll see the important part of this is going to be time from emotional intelligence, behavioral profiles that we talk about the first 3 months. It's going to automatically, you'll see the connection. This is why I always go through when we're talking about business, that I say it has to be about yourself also. There's no separation. And I think in light of what we experienced this week, because you're going to see some of these techniques I had to employ very quickly over this past week. And it's very serious. As you'll see, you have a control over what affects you. Sometimes we think we don't, but you have a lot more control over what affects you than you think. Now let's just start into talk about understanding what is stress And I want to go with that from a basis so that we can understand why we feel control. A lot of times think, stress, negative, and control is just too overwhelming. But I wanted to challenge us today on that. The definition of stress typically, and this is where sometimes people misunderstand, is stress is just a natural physical and mental reaction to life experiences. I want to repeat that. Stress is a natural physical and mental reaction to life experiences. Why is that defined? And if you can look that up, and that's basically the definition across the board medically, Webster Dictionary. Why is that so important? Because stress is not positive or negative. It's what we have defined based upon experience and how we perceive it. So what is stressful to one and negatively could be no big deal to another with the same event and same experience. And that's why I want you to understand you have much more power and control over what affects you than you may think. And we'll see that, and we'll see that from the brain perspective of why that is the case physically, in physiology, why that is the case that stress doesn't come negative or positive. It's how we react to it that makes it negative or positive. Just to give you an example, today is going to start the football playoffs, NFL. And how many, when you see sometimes the highlights, especially New Orleans is in it, but you ever see the Drew Brees chant and that they might see? If you ever want to see it, go on YouTube, where they get themselves at the beginning of the game and Drew Brees is in the middle. And he's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they got the whole people getting all hyped up and champed up. Well, anytime you get into sports and you're getting pumped up and you're getting, that is you purposely inducing stress upon your body. And why is that the case? Because we'll see where stress has an effect on your body physically and psychologically, but it's how you determine it. That is an example of good stress, because what he's doing is getting certain reactions mentally and physically for you to be prepared to go out and play a game. People who are charismatic also understand and utilize these techniques. You go into a church setting and religious setting, and you talk about preachers who do harmonics. The fact that they raise their voice at certain pitches and certain sounds have a response, that's creating certain type of physical and psychological responses in individuals. But that is viewed as positive stress. Now, most of the time when we think of stress, we think of it as negative. And that's why we also have this particular perspective that negative is bad, that stress is bad. But stress, once again, is just our natural physical and mental reaction to the life experiences, how we've been built. And there was a purpose of it. So let's go into it a little bit further. Recall this slide. This slide was from when we talked about emotional intelligence. And this is important because the emotional intelligence, remember, is the fact that is how do individuals outside of us perceive us and our reaction to that. And it has a lot to do with our brain functioning, conscious and subconscious, that determines what we are giving off to others and what we're giving off to ourselves as far as our body reaction. Remember these different parts of the brain. The thalamus deals with emotional stimulus. So that's the emotions that you operate under, your feelings. The cortex is the logical part of your brain. The amygdala is your emotional response to what you see coming through your sensories from your hands, eyes, what you hear. That input comes in through your thalamus. Then typically your cortex, your brain that is logical, processes that. And then you give a response that sends it to the body that allows you to react. Now, the problem is that when your body perceives input, life, situations, circumstances, events, if your body or your brain perceives it as threatening, then it's going to bypass your sensory cortex and go to your amygdala. And your amygdala contains your stored memories, past memories, so that is a file cabinet so that you can react quicker under threat. So as things come in through your sensory thalamus, eyes, hands, what you perceive as inputs, your brain is processing these things in milliseconds, threat, non-threat, based upon past experiences that have been still stored up in your amygdala. And then it sends it to be able to the rest of your body to react. That is the fundamental issue when we look at and function of what causes what we view as positive or negative stress. Because your body's going to react to stress, and how it reacts is how it determines is it a threat or non-threat. So when I refer back to that Drew Brees pump up chant for his offense, oh, we're going to get this 1, 2, 3, or you're going to get hyped up. When you go to football games and they start playing certain songs and here we go, and you get all hyped up, your body is interpreting those things and is sending responses to your mind. Your brain's interpreting that and sending responses to your body and stimulating certain hormones that have an effect on certain parts of your body, and you produce certain things, such as in your heart, your breathing, all these different other things. It's the same thing as negative. Your body response is to those different things of hormones, but it's much more intense because depending upon how you perceive it, of your inputs, you're going to have certain responses, because it is a defensive mechanism system that the brain and the body were built with, so that we call it fight or flight. That if it's perceived negatively, there's certain hormones, chemicals that are released so that you're able to fight the threat or flee from it. The problem is that we can produce those same type of hormones based upon how we perceive things. So if you're perceiving it based upon your past emotional response and memories as negatively, you're going to produce all those hormones in physical reactions. And if you don't do anything with it properly, that's when we get it called hijack. We can become limbically hijacked, and we get into this routine and becomes very hyped up, stressed. You talk about rage, anger, war. All those things is because of certain things that we produce in ourselves that build up that have to be released. So when you undergo stress, the results of that reaction, positive or negative to stress, has to be released. Because if it's not released, then it turns inwardly and it becomes disease. And you'll see the parallels between this when you talk about strokes, heart disease, high blood pressure. All these different things of illness is based upon these emotional responses, positive or negative, that haven't been released in your body. Because Your body was meant to produce these things, and you were supposed to operate on it for fight or flight if you viewed it as negative. And if you don't release it, it's going to turn within, because you have all these chemicals built up, and it's going to start eating away internally. And you'll see the parallel as we go through. So before I go on, is there any questions on the fact that stress is just physical and emotional response to any life-changing event, circumstance? It is not positive or negative. The event is neutral. We deem it positive or negative based upon our own experiences. Okay. Going forward. Now, how does stress affect our body? This is the physical response. And you'll see that if the results of stress that haven't been released, this is how it affects internally. Increases cholesterol and fatty acids in the blood for energy production systems. It increases blood pressure. You have localized inflammation, redness, swelling, heat, and pain. It increases production of blood sugar for energy. It decreases protein synthesis, intestinal movement, digestion, immune allergic response systems, increased metabolism, faster heartbeat, faster respiration, faster blood clotting, increased stomach acids. So as you look at this, you can see how the release, the fact of how we determine positive or negative reactions to life events, stress produces physical reactions within our body that gets released. And whether released it outside or internal, these are the things that are the result. Why? Because when you're under fight or flight, your body is saying, all right, speed up and start burning energy, because we need to get ready to run or fight ourselves out of this situation. So that's why your metabolism speeds up, your heart will speed up. That's why your blood pressure will raise up, because you're starting to pump more blood so you can get that blood to your extremities to start ready to either run or fight. So all these things are being released based upon when you're introduced to stress. And you'll see about other hormones that are released. So the hormones help with functioning some of these things. So that you can see why negative perspective of stress will affect us in disease. Can you see a lot of the diseases that are listed here? Tied. And this is why I started researching, getting into these books and all that, because I started to have high blood pressure. You know, a lot of other things we'll get into this that are some of the results, but this is just the natural result of encountering stress. It is meant to protect you. So your body will start doing certain things and releasing hormones and start getting into a position so you are protected. But when you start creating these hormones, it has to be released, because it was meant to be used to fight or run. And if it's not, then it works itself inwardly against your existing organs. Any questions on this as we go into some more specifics of kind of what Michael Dial was talking about? And this is going to get to the meats and crux of it. I want to make sure we understand, because it's going to be important as we go to the next, because you can't deal with management unless you understand the cause. Because I firmly believe nothing I can talk about as far as management is new. But the question is why does it take for some people not to deal with these management techniques? And I firmly believe that it can come to people don't understand how they are hurting their own selves. They don't understand the cause. because you've been taught to or told by a doctor, or you hear on news, you got to do this, exercise, nutrition, exercise, but you don't understand why. And I was in that same situation. I didn't understand that I was creating my own situation based upon the perception of where I was at and dealing with, from job, relationships, whatever. And when you're doing these particular things, your body is going to do what it was created to do. The other part of this too is when I went to Germany, and we had a session with a German doctor, and she said to us, "You Americans don't get it. You are under so much negative stress, and that is affecting your life when you talk about high blood pressure, allergies, all these other things is tied to all of this." Whereas in Europe, I saw them biking, all around. I saw that they had a refrigerator that was apartment size refrigerator, where they had to go every day to the local market that they could walk to and grab the salad, the lettuce and the tomatoes, and that they had farms around, and they got their food and they prepared dinner each day after going to shopping each day. They didn't have a huge refrigerator that can store stuff for weeks, which had preservatives in it. And they exercise. On the weekends or evening after they got off work, you could see them with their kids bicycling all over the place. I know people in Pittsburgh are mad because they're starting to put bicycles up for the young people coming into the, like the Googles and all that. But that's all you saw over there in Germany. Bicycle routes, people bicycling with their family, all the different places. And this doctor said, "You Americans don't get it. You work, 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 and you're dying off quicker. What you eat is killing you. The lack of exercise and all this work is increasing amount of negative stress." So that's where I started looking and listening, and they talked about inflammation and allergies because of the foods that we're eating and different things like that. That's why I'm spending these next 3 months talking about stress, nutrition, exercise, how we eat properly, because all of that. And we can choose to do this naturally, which is what they push forth over in Europe much more than they do here. Because in here, we push medication. And medication is to be some simple to help alleviate symptoms, but medication is not the cure all. I've been on the same high blood pressure medication for 14 years because when I donated a kidney, I didn't realize that kidneys help function with blood pressure. And so my blood pressure went up. Now I'm on minimum medication, one, that's minimum. And it is a medication that will help expand my blood vessels so that it will bring pressure down. But I've been on that same minimum medication for the last 15 years. I haven't had to go to a water pill and other cholesterol medications and things like that because I started putting and implementing these techniques in to minimize that. And then when I recognized when I had my broken ankle and I'm sitting at home, I had to come off the medication because my blood pressure was dropping too low, which let me know my job was one pain of source of negative stress. And I had to be a decision of when I had to separate from that, my blood pressure has been much more lower now than it was when I was. So that's why I mean, we have to look at these things holistically and make decisions. Am I going to love myself first or follow the pattern? Can you hear me? Medication is just a pacifier for dealing with what is the true issues that are going on. And I'm not saying don't use it as a Band-Aid, but that's not going to solve the issue internally. So that's why I take this very seriously when I look at these books and look at studying emotional intelligence and all these different things, because all these things are having an effect on our body, and we can't expect anyone else to correct that because we have to take our own personal responsibility for us. So let's look at some techniques to be able to manage stress. Now as you look at on the left side, we say, okay, let's look at the negative effects. So what are the negative effects, as we saw from the previous slide, of how we perceive life experiences and challenges and events and how that affects our body? Well, one of the biggest issues is addictive behaviors, whether it be smoking, drinking, drugs. Your body will respond to it with addictive behaviors based upon prolonged endurance of negative stress. And there's a reason. And we'll get into it a lot more after this slide, but I want you to, to understand how the hormones that are being produced based off of stress, these are why these are negative effects of it. Addictive behaviors is based upon when you're under negative stress, you produce certain hormones, and those hormones have an effect on your body that allow for you to become much more addictive to behaviors. That's why you see people who are under stress smoke a lot or have to drink or whatever, because the negative stress is producing hormones that require them to maintain that amount of stress or that level of hormone in order for them not to go into withdrawal. So my years of dealing with drug addiction and in the agency I had to, I was running, I saw a lot when I'm back talking to those who were clients and seeing and understanding the science, could understand we all have some addictive behavior based upon what are the things that we deal with. So, cocaine addiction, we're like, oh, that's bad, terrible. That is just a result of negative stress that has been unchallenged or managed, no different than someone might be smoking, or someone might have addictive behavior of obsessive compulsive about disorder or certain things. Because the hormones are chemicals in our body that are produced that are no different than chemicals outside that we take in. The only thing is, by us reacting negatively to stress, we're producing internally, and it has the same effect as if we might have taken it orally or smoked it. So addictive behaviors is one of the prime negative effects of stress. Now, how do you deal with that? A management technique to that is therapy, medication, or rehabilitation. And the one thing I will say as an African American is that African Americans for so long have not taken the benefits of therapy. Because remember, stress produces physical and mental effects on you. And we have no problem sometimes going to the doctors because we might be getting lightheaded because we have high blood pressure. And then the doctor, because especially in the United States, prescribes medication. Whereas in Europe, they want to do with a holistic approach. What are you eating? Do you get enough exercise? What's first? So, therapy is a very beneficial thing. When I was dealing with a amount of stress that was on my life, I was going to a therapist for 2 years every week. I went every week for 2 years to invest in myself. Now I'm on maintenance. I go once a month. But that's important because if you recognize that you're under negative stress, then you can't you can't ignore it. You have to be proactive and you have to love yourself enough to deal with it. So one of the things that I think is very unused, especially in the African American community, is therapy. The second negative effect is insomnia, the ability not to be able to sleep. I was dealing with that also. And now when I read Dr. Mike Dowell's book, I could understand why. folks who know me now, for almost 15 years, I would get about 2.5 hours of sleep a night. And anyone you tell that to would be saying, that can't be sustainable. But that's what I was at, about 2.5 hours of sleep. Now I sleep on average about 5 hours. But I had to work my way to that by letting go of certain things, relationships, jobs, whatever, in order to, and exercise to get to that point. But insomnia is a big thing. So one of the couple techniques to deal with that: yoga, meditation, breathing. My therapist taught me some breathing techniques, some stress point techniques that when I see myself and start recognizing the effects of negative stress on me, to be able to stop that limbic hijack to take place in the brain, so that I can slow down the production of these negative hormones so that it doesn't become a cycle. And then eating habits. We all know when we get under stress, sometimes we like chocolate, ice cream. There's a reason your body craves those certain things, because it needs it to feed that fight or flight, to get you ready to get pumped up. It needs heavy carbs. When you're under negative stress, you start eating chocolates and ice cream and sugar and sweet and a lot of carbs. Your body needs that quick sugar input to fight. So that's a telltale sign you're under negative stress. So with nutrition, you teach yourself, well, I need carbs, but I can turn it into positive carbs versus the negative carbs to deal with that. There are positive carbs you can eat. Sweet potato is a positive carb. So there are a lot of positive carbs. So you have to train yourself. And this is why I go back to addictive behavior. The number one addictive behavior, most people think, is cocaine, heroin, and all that smoking. It is eating improperly. Food is the disease in this country. Because when you look at the chemical inputs put in to preserve it, that has an effect on your body and becomes addictive. So eating habits is very affected by negative stress, but we have control over nutrition. Sometimes we say, I don't like it. I don't like this. Well, the one thing I recognize is that's a choice. And when I learned over the last several years and got serious about exercise again and working out and training, I hadn't done it in about a year or two, but I used to do it when I was training with my trainer every year and did a cut each year to cleanse myself and also drop weight. I started my cut this year again, because what I recognized during the cut is it forces you, when you start cutting out bad carbs and things like that, you start recognizing how addictive food is. And then over time, you get used to the good carbs again, the lettuce as fiber to help burn, because that is one of the negative things that you want with carbs and things like that. And you're getting into things is your body needs wood to burn. So fiber is a kindling. So if you start going to your natural vegetables, you can eat as much vegetables you want when you're cutting, because that just burns up, and it adds for you to help speed up metabolism, to help burn up that excess fuel and hormones that was dumped into your system. So I'm big on eating habits and nutrition. Anxiety and depression, and we'll get into those hormones about why that is, but I want to caution us, feeling bad is not anxiety or depression. These things are clinical diagnoses, which is why it's important to have a therapist and psychiatrist in working with you, because those are, it's not, I feel bad today, so I'm going, no, there's reasons, and there's usually chemical imbalances that trigger these anxiety and depressions. But there are foods and supplements you can use in order to help with that. one of the things that my therapist is a clinical therapist, but she's also a holistic approach, which is why I like her. And we talk about this. If you're experiencing anxiety, there is a natural tea, that is out there that you can use. She would refer to me certain things. Anyone ever heard of matcha? Matcha, if you go into, and when you ever have a chance, Google it, matcha, it is a natural herb that will counteract anxiety and depression. And so if you ever Google it, there's matcha tea out there, matcha green tea. I have some of him. That's something that can be used over time that will boost up and trigger and offset the anxiety that's caused because of certain hormonal levels that might be too low or too high. Matcha is a natural herb that offsets that. And that's available. Bigelow has the matcha. You have it, Keurig. If you have a Keurig, they have matcha green tea. So this is what I mean. And Dr. Mike Dowell's book talks about a lot of these things when we get into nutrition. Well, that's going to be in the next session, is what are some of the natural things we can do and use to help counter some of these things as far as stress, negative stress in our lives. There's certain foods you can eat that will help boost up. There's certain supplements you can use to help boost up. Weaken immune system. When we talk about what's an event of COVID right now that's happening, we can talk about, okay, socially distancing and, wash your hands and all those things, which are important. But those are just basic things for any virus, period. Whether it be a cold, flu, viral infection, those are things we should be doing for any virus. Mask. I note that a lot of foreign, Asian countries that were dealing with swine flu and all these other things, for years, they would be wearing masks. I'd be getting on planes, they had masks on, and we were sitting there as Americans. I guess we felt we were physically stronger to fight a virus that doesn't fight physically. But, other countries been using these same practices for years because they were dealing with swine flu and all these other things for years. Bird flu, which is the coronavirus. It's just in a different form for years. So the best thing to deal with the coronavirus or any virus is to strengthen your immune system. And how do you strengthen your immune system? Proper nutrition, exercise, supplements. Those basic things. Isolation has a negative effect. When you start going through all these other addictive behaviors, insomnia, eating habits, anxiety, depression, weakened immune system, you're basically pulling yourself away from others. And that's why it's so dangerous now, because of social distancing and the mental health that's coming out of this, is because we are meant as human beings to be socially interactive. And so when you become isolated, you have more time operating of your mind on yourself internally. And you don't have a support system. And so that's why reaching out either through Zoom or other type of means is still going to be important. But isolation is a big negative effect. And part of the techniques to help manage that is friends, family, church groups that you can be involved with. So if you recognize someone starting to pull themselves away, that's a danger sign. And then the other thing is that negative effects or perceptions of events, what we call stress, it triggers other health problems. The one thing I recognize, when I'm under very severe negative stress, my back will go out. That's one, my back will go out. And it takes about 6 weeks dealing with a chiropractor and all. I have regular maintenance. Every 2 weeks, I go to a chiropractor because I have a physical problem within my back and herniated disc that trigger in my hip, that trigger my back to go out of alignment, and that will put stress on my back. But if I go through a very stressful thing, my back will immediately go out, and it'll take 6 weeks for me to go through rehab to bring that back into alignment, because stress will cause other weak areas on your body to be triggered. Some other people, it might be between the shoulder blades. Some people might be the heart. They get anxiety, or some people might get stress, go under and get a panic attack. There's other different ways that people go through, but stress not managed properly will cause and trigger other physical areas and disease. And that's where regular doctor, therapy, medication is important. So before I go to the hormones as a result that has an effect on these negative effects, any questions on that? Okay, this is going to be the last slide, and then we can open it up for discussion. Whoops. Oh, I forgot the other slide. I apologize. I must have hid the other slide. I want to make sure I get that properly. So, all right. Oh, I had it. All right. Okay. Let me see if we can put it back. There we go. Can you see it? Okay. Here is the hormonal response to stress. I don't want to say negative. It's both positive and negative, but your reactions produce these hormones in your body. Let's talk about adrenaline. I go back to Drew Brees. Reason why you have coaches, people talking about, it's game time. Why? Because they're trying to produce adrenaline. And what does adrenaline do? It's also called epinephrine, which is a hormone your body makes in the moments of crisis. Now, when you see that, what are times where you've seen that in movies and TV programs or whatever? Adrenaline or epinephrine? I will tell you, remember, if you watch, how many ever saw Breaking Bad? Breaking Bad, about the high school teacher who became one of the biggest drug dealers, TV show? Mm-mm. Because he started producing meth. Meth is a derivative of adrenaline. If you ever understand why people on meth look always wired up and all that, because that's all, it's this hormone. That's what meth is. It's crystallized adrenaline.
An example of where I've seen adrenaline at in a movie is the movie with Denzel Washington and the football team. Remember the Titans? Yeah. When they get hyped for the game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Your body produces that. It's the same thing when your heart go into heart attack. What do? Boom, they stick that needle into the heart. They're sticking this in. Why? Because they want to get that heart to get started back up again. So adrenaline is a hormone in your body in a moment of crisis. It makes the heart beat faster and work harder, increases the flow of the blood to muscles, makes you more alert, and causes other changes to prepare the body to meet an emergency. So when you deal with stress, your body starts producing adrenaline. That is why resulting that if you don't deal with that adrenaline properly, that's why people have strokes and heart attacks, because you keep doing that over and over again. Your heart can't keep taking up with that. That's why heart disease is so tied to stress, because your body starts producing adrenaline. And if anyone knows anything, if you can look at, understand the meth drug, adrenaline is very addictive. That's why people who are on meth are very addictive. They're all wired. They can't sleep for 3 days. So we see that drug, but that is a hormone that our body produces. And if you're under stress for so long time and your body can't keep up with that making of it, you go into withdrawals. And that's why you get physical addiction by going to other drugs to produce that same thing. So I want us to understand that about addiction and all. Addiction doesn't start from the outside. It's because of what you react to internally, and your body gets used to those certain levels. So that's why if you're under stress, you have to deal with what's being produced. So adrenaline is one of the hormones. And remember, it's supposed to be to help you get ready, to get you pumped up to fight or run. And if you're not doing either, then it's going to turn inward. That's why exercise is so important in countering stress, to help reduce that levels down. The second, cortisol. Cortisol specifically plays a role in metabolism. It stimulates the liver to increase production of blood sugar. It also helps the body convert fats, proteins, and carbohydrates into usable energy. This is why you get cravings when you're under stress, because cortisol is released and it's looking for fats, proteins, and carbohydrates to start burning. So cortisol is released in your body to start burning stuff so that you get energy to fight or run. And if you don't use that up, it gets stored as fat in your body. And that's what we refer to as the belly fat. So folks that are under extreme stress that don't deal with it, it becomes belly fat. And what I learned from Michael Dowell, though, you're going to see how that has relations to melatonin, the ability to sleep. But cortisol is produced and released because it's looking to help convert fat, proteins, and carbohydrates, which is the ice cream that we try to go to, the chocolates we try to go to, which is why you got to convert that to positive carbs. But your body's just doing this because of what you determine as a threat. Then here's where we get into some of the other particular things when we look at addictive behavior. Dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain responsible for motivation and pleasure. It makes us feel good for doing certain activities, encouraging us to do more of those activities in the future. This is why this has an effect on anxiety and depression. Because if you don't keep your dopamine levels up to a certain level, you can go into depression and anxiety. But if you are falsely keeping them up and your body can't keep up, then you have to take in this hormone in order to prevent withdrawal feelings. That's why people go to cocaine and heroin, because cocaine and heroin specifically increases dopamine levels in the body. But we see it as an addiction but it's a regulatory mechanism to keep them from crashing and withdrawing. So dopamine makes you feel good. It allows you to feel good, happy. Another chemical that's, that works with dopamine is serotonin. Serotonin is sometimes known as the happy chemical because it appears to play an important role in regulating mood, and low levels of serotonin in the brain have been associated with depression. So once again, all these different things based upon how we react to events in life produces these particular things in certain levels. And if we don't deal with them properly, it can turn internally onto us. But if you want to get to a point where you deal with feeling good and all that, dopamine and serotonin are very important. These are the things that kind of give you, for those who like running, marathon runners that run for 26.1 mile or 2 miles, they say as soon as they get going, anyone that knows, especially if you exercise a lot, you get into that zone. The zone that we refer to is the release of dopamine and serotonin in our bodies. So you've exercised enough, you moved enough physical activity to produce the release of dopamine and serotonin. So you're in the zone. So that thing that you were struggling with, I want to give up. Then all of a sudden the release of these chemicals, you're like, I got this now. I'm hyped now. Why? Because your body releases that because you to use it to fight or flight. So that shows us that if you're struggling, into a point of exercising and get to a point, if you continue on with it, you eventually body will produce enough that you get into the zone. And then you'll see, well, the first 15 minutes, it was tough. And then 40 minutes later, I got this thing. So, a lot of trainers who train professionally, they say, okay, how do we be able to manipulate this so to get you, quote, in the zone sooner? And that's where you have all these things, all these hormones and growth hormones and all these other things that operate to try to do that. But it is getting yourself in the zone, because that way you don't feel the pain because you're in euphoria and you're able to push forward. Your body's still going through the same thing, but you're in a different state because of these chemicals have been released. That's why there's alternative drugs to do the same thing. So when someone's depressed, they need to get themselves up. You can do it physically. But for those folks who have got their level so high that their body can't produce enough, that's where the drugs come into. And that's why sometimes medication needs to be prescribed to help facilitate that. Because else your body goes into withdrawal and starts shutting down. And the last hormone is melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone in your body that plays a role in sleep. The production and release of melatonin in the brain is connected to the time of day, increasing when it's dark and decreasing when it's light. Melatonin is produced at nighttime to help your body go to sleep. But what I didn't realize is the relationship, and Dr. Mike Dow talks about this, is the relationship between melatonin and cortisol. If you notice, when sunlight comes up, so your body at nighttime produces melatonin that allows you to go to sleep. And what melatonin is actually is the cortisol that breaks down into melatonin. And then when light is placed upon yourself in the morning, sunlight comes in, the daylight comes up, that sunlight then converts melatonin into cortisol. And what does cortisol do? It helps stimulate the blood flow so it brings you energy. That's what allows you to wake up. So there is a relationship between cortisol and melatonin. and sunlight is the trigger. That's why sun therapy and vitamin D as a supplement is important, because it allows for that function for you that might be depressed. It allows for you to be able to convert and reduce melatonin in your system to allow you to wake up and feel energized, because it becomes cortisol now. And folks like me that are like daytime people, I'm much more energetic in the morning than I'm at nighttime. And what that tells me is that I'm able to produce cortisol very quickly, to be energized quickly in the morning. Whereas some folks, you're like, I got to get coffee, I got to get caffeine to help stimulate the energy. Well, I'm naturally producing cortisol levels to be able to do that. That's why I can be up that quickly. Now, the issue is the conversion of cortisol to melatonin to help me go to sleep. Because in the past, I had trouble with sleeping because I didn't have enough melatonin levels in my body to be able to help bring me down, because my mind was still producing. And so that is where therapy, relaxation techniques, winding down was important, because I had to learn how to bring my mind down so I wasn't producing cortisol to keep stimulating me up. And that's why a lot of times they will tell you that if you are trying to sleep at night, make sure you turn the light off, because if you have a TV on and things like that, light, once again, what does light do? Light converts melatonin into cortisol to raise you up. So you need to go in darkness. You need to bring your mind down so it's not processing, because your mind's processing, it's deeming things positive or negative. It's producing stress. And if your mind is processed like me, and this is why you have to understand your behavior and your personality. I'm a processor. So if I'm stimulating, my mind's stimulating, I'm producing cortisol, I'm producing serotonin. So I'm keeping myself up, which is preventing me from allowing for that melatonin that could be, cortisol to be produced, converted into melatonin to bring me down. So I used to take melatonin, and that's what I had to do for about 2 years so I could at least get 4 hours of sleep. And now I don't take melatonin. I exercise in the morning, and I'm in a much more consistent 5 to 6 hour sleep cycle. But I had to learn all these things. So certain things you can't do at night. I don't drink coffee because that would be too stimulant to me. Although I do take energy, and there's certain energy things, and there's amino acids and things you can take. So we'll talk about those things with nutrition. But supplements are meant to supplement what you don't get from food. The main thing is try to get it from food, and food contains a lot of these things, vitamins, hormones, and things in it that help stimulate these things. But this is why it's very important to understand that your reaction to stress, negative, positive, produces these hormones. And these hormones will have an effect on your body internally or externally, depending upon how you release them under your management. So I'm going to open it up for questions. You can unmute yourself and for discussion. This week was a good example of what stress techniques we had to utilize when you saw what was happening. So questions, comments? Go ahead, Chanel.
Yes.
Oh, no, Chanel.
I didn't have a question. I just I enjoyed the part mostly about the nutrition part, because I do see the difference in when you like the good carbs and everything like that with complex carbs. And a lot of people don't know that, when they hear carbs, they either think negative of it, or they think that all carbs are good, which they're not. So, to know that for an example, over the holiday break, I ate out of what I usually don't eat. So I'm used to eating right now because I'm in a bulking stage. So I usually eating brown rice and sweet potatoes and everything like that. But during the holidays, I kind of just ventured off of that, and I noticed how much my energy was off, And as soon as I got back into line, I went back to normal with my energy and everything like that. So it is important that people do realize that, you know, how important nutrition is, to stress and everything like that, because it does play a part. I enjoyed that part the most today.
Well, thank you. I agree with you. Like you just didn't even mention a good brown rice is a good carb.
Mm-hmm.
A good carb.
Mm-hmm.
Joel, you had a comment, question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I was listening to this, again. I agree with Chanel. This is very good. Um, in regards to exercise, um, so if I heard right, you're saying that when we exercise, it helps to reduce harmful levels of, I don't want to say negative hormones, but I guess that's the best way I can put it for asking the question.
Negative effects
So
of the hormones that
negative effects, yeah. So exercising helps reduce that away.
yes, and it's not just it's the right exercise, because there was a doctor in Philadelphia that I went to a seminar with that was teaching on this, why children, especially in the foster care system, need to be able to exercise. And it's not just to say, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and like raise my arms. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
your body's producing hormones to run or fight. So it has to be physical enough that you're either in motion with your legs or with your arms to the extent that it's releasing. So sitting around, and just wanting to sit there and playing video games is not exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You have to
Yeah,
either
I got you.
run, walk, whatever type of things, because your body then recognizes that I'm releasing these hormones to do these things. Okay.
So in other words, it should be something that will uh, cause some physical exertion and raise your heart, and your heart rate should be raised. Basically, pretty
Yes.
much.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. Because
Okay.
that's
And
what
one
the
other thing
hormone
too.
seeks to do.
Mm-hmm. One other thing too. Yeah, I was thinking about, um, I'm encouraged to get back to it now after hearing what I heard today. But I was doing, I started doing these stretching exercises before I would go to bed at night. They were designed specifically for nighttime when when you get ready to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and it was weird because I never experienced this before, but I noticed when I would do those, I would go to sleep and sleep all night until the alarm went off the next morning. And and as usually as is the case with us so many times, we let things push us away, even from stuff that we sometimes recognize as doing us good. And I got away from that, and I noticed that I'd sleep 4 or 5 hours and maybe get up to go to the bathroom and then be awake for another half hour, 45 minutes, and then fall back asleep and be asleep 2 hours, and now it's time to get up because the alarm's going off, and I feel like I haven't slept in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going back to the start with tonight. I'm going back to doing those stretches that I was doing before bedtime.
Yeah, that's why stressing yoga at nighttime is important. I learned yoga over the period of time because it was helping me bring my mind. My biggest issue is my mind. I'm a processor, and that's why you need to know your behavior and your personality, because then I recognize there's certain things I got to give myself leeway to do, and like I was up Wednesday night when all this stuff was going on because I'm like, what is going on? This is not, and all that. And so then you have to look at what are the techniques you have to use, being able to, let your mind go and process, or go to yoga, or certain things of some mild stressors that might allow your mind to walk away and let that release, or things like that are going to be important, because you have to know yourself. These techniques are applicable based upon who you are. Um, you know, I exercise a lot. I also like reading. Reading is a good, way of bringing your mind down, meditation, prayer, things that will help take your mind from one of the things that continues to feed that negative effect to another thing that will help with that. So you have to be aware of yourself to be able to manage these things properly. And it just starts making up your mind, knowing that you have control. We used to think, I have no control. This job, this person, this one, you have control, and you have to make a decision. And I'm more important than the things that I feel that are outside determining my fate in life. And that's the tough part. Any other questions? Well, I thank you for your participation. We are continuing. If you haven't got the chance to go look at Michael Dahl's book, we're going to go and deal with the nutrition part of it. Just as Tanel was getting into it, there are certain foods and there's certain supplements. And I use about 17 supplements a day. And here's the difference. I know which each supplement does and has an effect. I won't just take something because I'm taking it. I'm taking it and I understand where my deficiencies are and what, why I need certain things. And we'll talk about it from the B12s, B6, and all these different things, and the foods that we utilize that can be able to be helpful for fiber and things like that, for vitamin C, all those different things that your body uses, because vitamin C is very important in the production and conversion of energy. It's very important. It's needed, as long as energy is needed too. And selenium is needed also, but we sometimes don't recognize. I didn't even realize, and I started taking that after I had the doctor in Canada explain that. It's in a multivitamin, but depending upon if you exercise, you need it much more because it helps with preventing cancer. Because the way, and we'll get into it, but your weight, remember, like a car energy, when your cells are producing and burning energy, that's what the vitamin C and iron and carbs, the positive carbs do. That's what's burning energy in your cells. You export. You export bad things, just like a car in the exhaust. And those are those bad things that float around in your body that help build up cancer, to convert your good cells into cancer. Selenium prevents and allows for that exhaust, the byproduct, to be pushed out of your cells into your bloodstream so it can exit out of your body. I never realized that before, but your body makes that naturally. But if you exercise, you burn much more energy, so you're going to need to help supplement that. So we'll talk about a lot of those different things of the vitamins and supplements and foods and how they interact with this as a stress mechanism, nutrition, exercise, and help with it and with energy and the feeling. So, and to help produce protein. There's certain things you need to help produce protein, because protein's needed to help transfer energy for building. And there's a reason, if you do it right, like I learned from a bodybuilder, the amount of protein, now I can't eat that amount of protein because of my kidney anymore, and I'm trying to reverse my levels down. But I mean, I was eating 200 grams of protein a day. Mm-hmm. You need that level to produce muscle mass. So I was eating all that more food and losing weight. And we can talk about that process too of the keto effect. I mean, and there's an effect. And when I say cut, I mean, I'm going into a keto diet to help burn excess fat. And there's a science behind that. And that is used to help people with certain diseases. People that have epilepsy use keto diets to help with containing that, because it deals with the insulin in your body and excess carbs. So there's a proper way you can do and utilize that to help with reducing insulin production and carbs, which produces fat. So So we're going to kind of talk about that under the next session with nutrition next month. That'll be February 13th on Saturday. So, well, once again, I'm over time, but I thank you for participating. Look forward to working with you all and talking and discussing these things next week. Remember to go through that Michael Dial book again, because we'll be gleaning things from that and just trying to make it to a point where it's applicable for us so that we can continue and manage ourselves, so that the more we are healthy for ourselves, we're healthy for our business and our loved ones, and we'll be able to actually maintain stress so that when we have to make decisions, because running your own business or is making decisions, and you want to make it in the best light. You want to do it from a logical perspective, not be limitedly hijacked and make emotional decisions. And stress, depending upon how we see it, will either make us do logical or negative decision making. So that's why it all works hand in hand. So I hope you all have a good rest of the day. Look forward to seeing you next month. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Sure.
You're welcome. See you all.
See you
Bye,
later.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.